19. I had no mother and no father. I was 4 years old when they first put a weapon in my hands. I was taught to suppress my feelings and to respect and obey my masters. I was encouraged to be obsessive about perfection. It wasn't the life I would have chosen, but the one ordained because of my genes. Just like the men I'm expected to command. But now, I have something wonderful, something I have chosen, and I will never let anyone take the child I'm carrying. General Etain Termukan, Private Journal. Gar Logistics Center, 12:30 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. It was lunchtime. The biggest decisions most people made at that time of day in the logistics center was whether to eat in the cafeteria or find a spot in the public courtyard nearby to enjoy an open-air snack. Odo's decision was whether to use the Verpine or walk up to the traitor, Hella Mediri, maneuver her into a shadowy alcove, and then garrote her or cut her throat. Verpine, best choice. Fast and silent, as long as the projectile didn't pass through her and hit something that made a noise. Mediri sat in the shadow of the plant filled with vivid yellow shrubs, eating a meal breadstick and reading a holozine oblivious to her life expectancy. Odo sat in the shade of a manicured tree with his datapad on his lap, calculating her remaining life in minutes. There was nobody within 10 meters of her, but there was a security holocam. A man sat down on the bench beside him. Well, our young friend in transport maintenance just had an unfortunate accident with a repulsor lift platform. Thanks for the use of your security codes. And he didn't turn into a Glennon, I hope. Mira looked utterly alien with light hair and eyes. Even his skin was tinted 2 shades paler. It didn't suit him. No vodka. He turned into a dead human. Skulls and repulsor lifts don't mix. Trust me. Just checking. You haven't told Kalbira about Kosai yet, have you? Mira asked. I thought he might be less distracted if we wait until this mission is completed. He's a true Verd, a warrior. He's never distracted when the shooting starts. There's no rush, Oda said. Miller shrugged. Out of armor and karma, he slouched in a convincingly civilian manner. So, shall I wander off? Oda was watching the security holocam that covered the area between the woman and the public refreshers, 20 meters beyond. Can you disrupt that holocam circuit for me on my mark? Mora felt in his coat for something and pulled out a slim stylus. It was an EMP disruptor. I can do it without leaving my seat, Nevard. Okay. I'll give you a reminder to kill the cam when I'm 5 meters from her. Mira tapped his ear. Comlink on. Odo took a few slow breaths. He had removed the folding stock from the Verpine rifle. It was now short enough to conceal under a document holder. He looked like any other anonymous, helmeted, convalescing clone trooper playing office boy and carting archives flimsy around. Go, Odo said, and stood up. He walked toward the refreshers, which took him on a path past the Mederi woman. Morel, kill the cam. He had a few moments now before a security console spotted the outage and tried to fix it. He took 5 fast strides and bent over Mederi, as if to ask her a question. She looked up as if an old friend had startled her. Hello, trooper. Hello, Ariati, Odo said. He drew the verb and put 2 rounds point blank through her forehead, and a third down at an angle through her upper chest. 1 round thudded through into the planter of soil behind her. Odo had no idea where the other 2 went, but the informant was now dead, and she simply slumped, head down as if still reading, a pool of her bright blood on the holozine's screen. Odo slipped the VEP back under the document folder and walked away. It had taken less than 10 seconds from cueing Morel to walking away. Nobody even looked at him as he strode calmly toward the Gar complex, past it, and met Morel on the other side of the speeder parking bays. They disappeared into the sea of vehicles and mounted the Aerotech speeder bike to head back to base. Calbia had always told the Gnolls they were instant death on legs. Odo liked to live up to that assessment. His thoughts were on Bethany Wenin as he rode off, and how it was good that he hadn't had to kill her too. Operational house, Kribu's hut, 1330 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. The more the tagged targets moved around Coruscant, the clearer the strike team's task became. That, Fire said admiringly, gets better every time I look at it, Boudica. Drusik stared at the Coruscant holoshot with a big grin and basked in the approval. The telltale red traces of the mocked terrorists as they moved around the city were forming a pattern that first-hand surveillance would have struggled to build up. It was obvious, really, he said. You would have come up with it yourselves sooner or later. Val put down a bowl of milk in front of the strill. It lapped noisily, showering droplets across the carpet. I vote that dust tagging becomes standard surveillance procedure. It's a matter for your sergeant, of course. The police interloper's trace had been removed. Jailer O'Brim had given her a painless and unnoticeable EMP sweep to kill transmissions from the marker powder she had inhaled. Now just 5 marked targets moved around the grids of blue light, building an accurate picture of where they went and where they stayed. The division between the 2 was now very much easier to see. 4 locations: the house in Banking Sector 9, the landing strip used by the fresh farm produce importers, and 2 apartments in the retail sector were clearly the most visited. But we probably only tagged Paree's hired help, Vi said. We want the bigger guys. The bigger guys, Rao said, need the hired help by their side. All this activity is connected to the fact that they're about to receive explosives they badly need. Now we know they use dead letter drops. For want of a better phrase, to avoid direct contact between the various terror cells in the network. It's how they ensure there's no way of tracing them back. So what does this tell you? If I studied the hypnotic blue and red lights in front of him, they're moving back and forth between locations over and over. And therefore, they're either one cell or there are several cells who have abandoned security precautions and are making direct contact with each other. Well done, Phi. Phi didn't care for vows, but he enjoyed praise. He savored the moment. So, what do you think we've got here? Given that this centered on the explosives, I think we are looking at the manufacturing cell. The people who make the bombs. Possibly also the ones who place them. Setting a complex device in a location or on a vessel can be a fiddly business. And I reckoned this lot would do it themselves. They need to be mobile to get to different target locations too. Hence the need for a busy landing strip. Nobody notices more traffic movement there. Now, Phi, that's a group of people worth taking out. Those are hard skills to replace in a hurry. Jusek gave Phi a playful punch on the shoulder, elated. Result. He seemed to see it as a big puzzle to be taken apart. If Phi hadn't seen Jusek use a lightsaber, he would have taken him for a boy who just liked playing with complicated kit. Time to make their eyes water, eh, Phi? You got it. Delta has reached the landing strip. You've reached the house in the banking sector. That just leaves the two apartments, and Odo and Morel have stopped off to eat those now. The Strill had finished its milk, most of which had ended up on the carpet. Thou, a sergeant, who believed in thrashing courage into his men. A sergeant who had scared Atin badly, grabbed a cloth from the kitchen area and mopped up the damp patches. Then he took a clean rag, soaked it, and wiped the Strill's mouth and jowls as if it were a baby. The animal accepted the indignity and rumbled with happiness. I wasn't sure he would ever know what went on in the heads of non-clones. Delta and Omega assembled in the main room, finding seats where they could, and spent the next hour planning three house assaults and a raid on an airstrip. They were basic maneuvers they had drilled for time and again on Commando. They'd done it for real more than once, too. They had fairly recent plans of the buildings, not to be relied upon absolutely, of course, and covert holocam surveillance. Apart from the fact that the squads were used to operating alone, it was near a done deal as an operation could be. Planning. It was all about planning. But there was always a surprise. Always one more factor you hadn't allowed for or didn't see. Vi planned for that too. They all did, deep down. Operational house, Kubu's hut, 1530 hours. 385 days after Geonosis. Ite knew. She had known it would happen in time. But it had happened now. In 2 brief, wonderful weeks. The force landscape that surrounded her had changed subtly, and she felt strangeness and purpose within her. Purpose that was someone's else. It was said that force-sensitive females could often detect the moment that they conceived, and it was true. Etain stood on the landing platform for a while, searching for the fear she always imagined might come with taking that irrevocable step, and not knowing its full consequences. But there was no fear. There was simply a pleasant sensation of certainty, almost like hands pressing on her shoulders, and a clear vision in the part of her brain that saw the universe without images, showed a new path through trials of red, colored lights. In a prosaic way, it reminded her of a holochart, but it was less solid, its threads and lines shifting. The new path that was marked through the tangle of colored threads was pale, silver and thick, and from it sprouted silver tendrils that snaked into the tangles of the rest of the image. This new life she carried would be significant, and it would touch many others. The force was clear if you listened carefully to it. And this time it said, "This is not wrong." On Kulora, I envied Jinot her certainty. I envied Master Fulier that quality, too. And now I have it at last. It was almost blissful. She savored the warm sun on her face, eyes closed for a few moments, and then walked back into the main room. It seemed oddly empty. Delta and Omega were catching up on sleep, doors shut. Ordo had disappeared with Morel, and Core had left a datapad running to log movements of suspects on the holochart while he went for a meal. Val stretched out in one chair with the Strill on his lap, while Scarata sat opposite him, boots up on the low table, eyes closed, hands clasped on his chest. Etain watched him, knowing that she might need to tell him even more, even before she told Darman. She would need Scarata's help, his list of contacts and places to disappear. Darman would be overwhelmed by it all, when he needed to keep his mind on fighting. But Scarata was a man of the world, never fazed by anything. He would understand what she was giving Darman, and want to help. Not yet, though. While she watched Scarata, Nina wandered out of his room in his red fatigues, scratching his head with both hands. He poured a glass of water and walked across the room in slow silence, to stand contemplating the sleeping Scarata with a slight frown. Then he went back to his room. He emerged a few moments later with a blanket and eased it over his sergeant, tucking it around him carefully. For once, the man didn't stir. Nina stood over him for a while, simply looking down at his face, lost in thought. "He's okay," Eugene whispered. "Just checking," Nina said quietly, and returned to his room. Eugene defocused for a few moments and sought Darman in the force. As ever, he was a well of calm uncertainty. Even while sleeping, when she focused on the room again, she realized Scarata had opened his eyes. "You okay, Attica?" he said. "Was that Nina just now?" "I'm fine." He was in a better mood now. Perhaps he regarded the matter between her and Odo as closed. "Yes, he was checking on you. He's a good lad. But he ought to be getting some sleep." He raked his hair with his fingers, yawning. "Fatigue affects your judgment, but not yours," Val said quietly. Scarata was alert in a heartbeat and swung his legs off the table onto the floor. Val could wind him up as surely as a mechanical toy. "If I don't move fast enough when the shooting starts, that's my problem. I'm used to it." "Yes, we all know." Val turned to Etain. "This is normally where he starts lecturing me on his ghastly childhood as a starving war orphan, living feral on some bomb site, and how I just ran away to become a mercenary because I was bored with my idle rich family." "Well, that saved me some time," Scarza said irritably. What he said. "You have a family, Val." Etain was suddenly mesmerized by people who had lives and parents. "Are you in contact with them?" "No. They cut me off when I declined to choose the career they wanted for me." "Wife? Children?" "Dear girl, we're Curval Dar. People who have to disappear for 8 years or more aren't the family kind. Except Cal, of course. But your family didn't wait for you, did they? That's all right, though. You've got a lot more sons now." If Etain had known nothing of Scarata, or even Val, it was the kind of jibe guaranteed to start a fight. Scarata was absolutely and instantly white with anger. One thing she knew about Mandalorians was that clan was a matter of honor. Scarata walked up to Val very slowly, and the shrill roke within, whining. Etain checked that Scarata's jacket with its lethal array of blades was still hanging over the back of the chair. Scarata shook his head, slow and deliberate. Val was much taller and a few kilos heavier, but Scarata never seemed to worry about that kind of detail. But that's the good thing about being Mando. If you don't get the family you want, you can go and choose one yourself. He looked suddenly older and very sad, small, crushed by time. "You going to tell her?" "Okay, Etain. My sons disowned me. In Mandalorian law, children can legally disown a parent who's shamed them. But it's rare. My sons left with their mother when we split up, and when I disappeared to Commando, and they couldn't locate me, they declared me da Bier, no longer a father. Oh my, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Etain knew how serious that would be for Mandoade. You found that out when you left Commando. No. Django brought the news back that they were looking for me about, 4 years in? 3 maybe. I forget. 2 sons and a daughter. Torijat and Rusan. Why were they looking for you? My ex-wife died. They wanted me to know. Oh, yeah. But you could have told them where you were at the time. Django could have talked to them. And you could have made your peace with them. And, Cal, you could have explained to them somehow and stopped it and revealed we had an army in training and compromise my lads' safety? Never. And not a word to any of the boys you hear. It's the only thing I ever kept from them. He'd sacrifice his good name and the last possibility of his family's love and forgiveness for the men he was training. It hit Etain hard in the chest like a blow. She turned to Val. Do you see your men as your sons? Of course I do. I have no others. It's why I made them into survivors. Don't think I don't love them just because I don't spoil them like kids. Here we go, Scarata said, all contempt. He's going to tell you that his father beat the Osik out of him, and it made a man out of him. Never did him any harm, no sir. I've lost just 3 men out of my batch, Cal. That tells me a lot about my methods. So I lost 14. You making a point? You made yours soft. They don't have that killer edge. No, I didn't brutalize mine like you did yours. You Khatun. Etain stepped between them, arms held out. Pieces of old conversations falling into place with awful clarity. The strill began rumbling in its throat and dropped to the floor to pace protectively in front of Val. It was just as well the bedroom doors were shut. Please stop this. We don't want the men to hear you fighting right now, do we? Like Nina says, save it for the enemy. Scarata turned his head with a sudden total focus that left Etain tasting a ripple in the force. But it wasn't the angry reaction of a man who had been stung by painful observation. It was genuine anguish. He glanced down at Murd as if considering giving it a good kick, then limped off to the landing platform. Don't do this to him, she said to Val. Please don't. Val simply shrugged and picked up the huge strill in his arms, as if it were a pup. It licked his face adoringly. You can fight ice cold or you can fight red hot. Cal fights hot. It's his weakness. You sound just like an old master of mine, Etain said, and went out to the platform after Scarata. Coruscant skylanes stretched above and below them, giving an illusion of infinity. Etain leaned on the safety rail with her head level with Scarlett as they gazed down. She searched his face. Cal, if you'd like me to do something about Val. He shook his head quickly, eyes still downcast. Thanks, Attica. But I can handle that heap of Osik. Never let a bully manipulate you. Scarletta's jaw worked silently. I'm to blame. For what? Setting boys to their deaths. Cal, don't do this to yourself. I took the credits, didn't I? Django whistled and I came. Running. I trained them from boys, little boys. 8, 9 years of nothing but training and fighting. No past, no childhood, no future. Cal, they don't go out. They don't get drunk. They don't chase women. We drill them and medicate them and shunt them from battle to battle. Without a day off, no rest, no fun. And then we scrape them off the battlefield and send what's left standing back to the front. And you alongside them. You gave them a heritage and a family. I'm as bad as Val. If you hadn't been there, your place would have been taken by another like him. You gave your men respect and affection. Scarletta let out a long breath and folded his hands. Elbows still braced on the rail of the balcony. A speeder horn blared far below them. You know something? Live fire exercises. They started 5 years into the development. That means I sent 10-year-old boys to die. And 11 and 12 and right on up to the time they were men. I lost 4 of my batch in training accidents. And some of those were even down to me. My rifle, my realism. Think about that. I hear that happens in any army. So, ask me the question then. Why didn't I ever say, whoa, enough? I've had some unkind thoughts about you, Attica. Why your kind never refused to lead an army of slaves. And then I thought, Cal, you Hutun, you're just the same as her. You never stood up against it. Your soldiers worship you. Scarletta closed his eyes, then screwed them tight shut for a moment. You think that makes me feel better? That stinking Strill loves Val. Monsters get loved irrationally, all the time. Etain wondered whether to soothe him by judiciously influencing his mind, that he would not feel guilty. But Scarletta was his own man, tough-minded, enough to spot her mind influence, and shrug her manipulations aside. If she asked him for his cooperation, no, Scarletta would never take the easy path. She had no comfort to offer him that wouldn't make matters worse. That was part of his unique and appealing courage. Her first impression was that he would be a man whose bluff exterior was simply embarrassed machismo. But Scarletta wasn't embarrassed about his emotions at all. He had the guts to wear his heart on his sleeve. It was probably what made him even more effective at killing. He could love as hard as he could punch. Force, stop reminding me. Duality. I know. I know you can't have light without dark. Her spiritual struggles were irrelevant now. She was carrying Darmin's child. She longed to tell him, and knew she had to wait. You love them, Cal, and love is never wrong. Yes, I do. His hard-lined face was an icon of passionate sincerity. All of them. I started with 104 trainees, plus my no lads. And now I've got 90 commandos left. They say parents should never have to outlive their kids. But I'm outliving them all. And I suppose that punishment serves me right. I was a rotten father. But, no. He held up his hand to stop her, and she paused. Scarata was benign, but absolute authority. It's not what you think. I'm not using these lads to salve my conscience. They deserve better than that. I'm just using what I've learned for them. Does it matter as long as they are loved? Yes, it does. I have to know that I care about them for who they are, or I've consigned them to being things again. We are Mandalorians. A Mandalorian isn't just a warrior. You see, he's a father, and he's a son, and your family matters. Those boys deserve a father. They deserve sons and daughters, too. But that isn't going to happen. But they can be sons, and the two things you have a duty to teach your sons are self-reliance and that you'd give your life for them. Scarata leaned on folded arms and gazed down into the hazy abyss again. And I would, Etain. I would. And I should have had that degree of conviction when I started this sorry mess back on Commando. And walked out. And left them to it. Because it wouldn't have shifted the clone program one bit. Even if it made you feel like you'd taken a brave stand. Is that how you feel? That stalking out of and refusing to leave them is more for my comfort than theirs. He lowered his head on his folded arms for a moment. Well, that answers my question. As a Jedi, Etain had never known a real father any more than a clone had. But in that moment, she knew exactly who she wanted him to be. She moved closer to Scarata to let her arm drape on his shoulder, and rested her head against his. A tear welled up in the wrinkled corner of his eye, then spilled down his cheek, and she wiped it away with her sleeve. He managed a smile even though he kept his gaze fixed on the traffic far below. You're a good man and a good father, she said. You should never doubt that for a moment. Your men don't, and neither do I. Well, I wasn't a good father until they made one out of me. But now he would also be a grandfather, too. And she knew it would delight him. She had given Darmin back his future. She closed her eyes and savored the new life within her, strong and strange and wonderful. Quibu's hut, main bar, 1800 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. Ordo shouldered a space for himself at the bar table between Nina and Boss, and helped himself to the container of juice. Cole was showing Scorch a dangerous trick with a vibroblade that required lightning reflexes to withdraw his hand before the blade thudded into the surface of the table. Scorch seemed wary. "But your hand's metal, you cheating Decoot," he said. "I bleed." "Yeah, jealous?" Cole jeered. His blade shaved Scorch's finger and went thunk in the table to cheers from Drusik and Darman. "You shiny boys always did envy us meat cans." The two squads seemed in good spirits. Good enough to be telling long and elaborate jokes without the usual competitive edge of bravado between Sev and Phi. They had a task to complete in 30 hours, and it seemed to have focused them completely, erasing all squad boundaries. It was what Odo had expected. They were professionals. Professionals put the job first. Anything less got you killed. But now they were having fun. Odo suspected it was the first time they'd ever let their hair down in an environment like this, because it was certainly a first for him. Skaraja looked as happy as he had ever seen him, and Drusik sat among them, wearing of all things a chest plate of Mandalorian armor under his jacket. "We presented it to Boudica as a souvenir," Skaraja said, rapping his knuckles on the plate, "in case we don't manage to have that fancy dinner. In case some of us are dead by the end of tomorrow." That was what he meant, and everyone knew it. They lived with it. It just seemed the more poignant now for knowing that a rare bond had been formed between unlikely comrades, two Jedi who openly admitted that they struggled with the disciplines of attachment. And Odo was sure now that he understood that. And a very mixed bag of clone soldiers, from captain to trooper, who had abandoned rank to answer to a sergeant who didn't answer to anyone. Phi, with his uncanny talent for spotting a mood, raised his glass. "Here's to Sicko." The mention of the pilot's name brought instant reverence to the noisy table. "To Sicko," they chorused. There was no point grieving. Settling a score with separatists was a far more productive use of their energy. Drusik winked at Odo, clearly happy in a way that reached beyond. Noisy laughter in a crowded bar. Whatever motes of serenity and separateness are surrounded men like Zay, Drusik's had vanished. If he had ever had it, he was daring to feel part of a tight-knit group of men. Whatever brotherhood was like within the Jedi Order, it didn't appear to be like this. Morel, his hair rinsed clean to its natural black, was now holding court and reciting an astonishing list of obscenities in 40 different languages. So far, he hadn't repeated himself once. Phi was bent double over the table, roaring with laughter. Even Nina was enjoying it, contributing the odd word of her tease. "It's nice to know that your advanced linguistic skills were devoted to something useful. Gulity, Mira said, deadpanned. Disgusting, said Phi. Beishit. What does that mean? Morel whispered a translation in Phi's ear, and his face fell slightly. Morel frowned. Don't tell me you've never heard of that one. We were raised to be polite boys, Phi said, clearly aghast. Can Huts really do that? You better believe it. I'm not sure I like civilian society, Phi said. I think I felt safer under fire. Coming from Phi, it would usually have been a joke. But like all his jokes, bitter reality lay not far beneath. Phi hadn't adjusted gracefully to the outside world. There was a moment of silence as reality intruded on all of them. I'll shoot you and cheer you up then, Sev said suddenly. Everyone laughed again. Darman drained his glass and got up to go. Scorch flicked a walnut at him with impressive accuracy, and it bounced off his head. Where are you going, Da? I'm off to calibrate my Ds. There was more wautious laughter. Darman didn't look amused. He shrugged and walked off in the direction of the turbolift, through a crowd of men from the 41st Elite who was shipping out in a few days. At least they had something few troopers ever would. 2 weeks without fighting. They didn't appear to be enjoying it, though. Calbier said that was what happened when you let someone out of prison after a long sentence. They didn't fit in, and they didn't know how to live outside a cell, or without a familiar routine. I know, though, and Phi wants to know. Don't wind him up about Etain, son, said Skarata. Scorch looked wary. He is not breaking any regulations, is he? I don't think so, but she is. The best thing was not to think. What happens to us when the war's over? Kor asked. Morel smiled. You'll have the things of a grateful republic. Now, who can guess what this obese word means? Odo glanced at Skarata, who raised his glass. Atin came to take Damin's place at the table with a Trilec Lacima on his arm. The man obviously wasn't as shy as he seemed, except for Val and Etain. The entire strike team had gathered here, and there was some sense of an important bond having been accomplished. It also felt very final. You and Morel are up to something, Scar said. I can tell. He has news, Calbier, Odo said. Oh? Should he tell him now? He thought it might distract him too much, but he didn't need to provide detail. It would give Calbier heart for what was to come. He's traced where our mutual friend fled immediately after the battle. There was no need to say that the friend was Kaminoan scientist Kosai, the head of the cloning program, or that she had gone missing after the Battle of Commando. The hunt, and it was a private matter, not Republic business, although the Grand Army footed the bill, was often reduced to just 2 words, any news. and if any of his other brothers, Prudy, Adin, Kamruk, Jang, found anything as well, Squatter would be told. They might have been carrying out intelligence missions for the Republic, but their true focus was finding elements of Kaminoan cloning technology that only Kosai had access to. Scarata's face became luminous. It seemed so erase every crease and scar for a few moments. "This is what I want to hear," he said softly. "You will have a future, all of you. I swear it." Jusek was watching him with interest. There was no point trying to conceal anything of an emotional nature from Jedi, as sensitive to the living force as Jusek and Etain. But it was unlikely that Scarata had shared that secret with him. He hadn't even told his commando squads. It was too fragile a mission. It was safer for them all not to know for the time being. Jusek raised his glass. It was just juice. Nobody would drink before a mission, if they had any sense. Alcohol had proved not to be a major preoccupation with commandos anyway, and whatever had been rumored, Calbia's only concession to alcohol was one glass of fiery colorless tiha at night to try to get to sleep. He found sleep increasingly elusive as the years of training progressed on Commando, and his conscience tore him apart piece by piece. He'd sleep well without it tonight, even if it was in a chair. "This is very, very good news," Scarata said. "A changed man for the moment. I dare to say it bodes well." They drank and joked and argued about hut curses, and then Scarata's calmly chirped, and he answered it discreetly, head lowered. Odo simply heard him say, "Now, are you serious?" "What is it?" Odo said. Morel paused in mid-curse, too, and the table fell silent. "It's our customer," Scarata said. Jaw tense again. "They've hit a small snag. They need to move tonight. There's no preparations, Ike. We have to rule in 3 hours. 20. You know that thing that sergeants are always supposed to yell at new recruits? I am your mother, I am your father. Well, what do you do when that's actually true? Cal Scarata was all they had, and the troopers didn't have anyone. How can you expect those boys to grow up normal? Captain Jaleb Obrim, to his wife over dinner. Operational House, Crew's Hut, 1935 hours. 385 days after Geonosis. Whole strike team ready to deploy. "So, what's your Shabla problem then, Periv?" Scarata conducted the conversation with his wrist comlink, propped on the table while he strapped on his Mando armor. Oda stood out of range of the comlink's mic, holding Obrim on the line via his own link. Cold feet. Can't get the finance in place. What exactly? Scarata didn't need to act angry. He was. Everyone in the team was used to working out on the fly, but all the planning the careful positioning to take out the maximum number of bodies, now teetered on the brink of disaster. Around him, Delta and Omega were armoring up in full fighting order. Catan rigged with DC-17's grenades, repelling lines, rapid entry ordnance, and a Plex rocket launcher per squad. For a moment, he was unsettled to see Omega and Val both in black armor. But they're mine. They're my squad. He renewed his concentration on Perive's voice. One of our colleagues has been picked up by the police. Perive's Jabami accent was very noticeable now. It was an indication of stress, and that was encouraging at an animal level for a mercenary. Scorazza gestured frantically to Ordo, but his head was already lowered, chin tucked into his chest, as he relayed the information to Obrim. We need to move on our operation, and you want me to drop by with the groceries when you've got CSF crawling all over you? I'm still wanted for 7 contract killings in town. Ordo gave a standing by signal, hand at shoulder level, fingers spread. Perive swallowed audibly. They are not crawling all over us, as you put it. One man was arrested. He might be a weak link. Cross-check this with Oblim. Where? This better not be in my backyard. Industrial sector. Pulled over for an illegal cannon upgrade to the speeder. Ordo nodded once and then gave a thumbs up. Confirmed. Scarazza felt his shoulders relax immediately. Called me suspicious, but last time somebody did this to me, they didn't plan on paying. You are not sticking to our timetable. I'm afraid it's you just a good old-fashioned screw-up. I'll be at your location at 2200 hours. Then. But you won't mind if I bring a couple of my colleagues just to be on the safe side. Not there. We have transport issues. What does that mean? I mean, we need to move our vessels somewhere safe. Bring the consignment to us at our landing strip and load it straight on. Scorch stepped in front of Scarata with as near to an expression of boyish delight as the man was ever going to manage. He mouthed Kalufresh at him. Any good mercenary could lip read, because if he wasn't already deafened by long exposures to gunfire, he couldn't hear a word in battle anyway. I need a location. We have a few vessels laid up in the commercial sector in quadrant F-76. Scarata watched Scorch clench both fists and pull his elbows hard into his sides in a gesture of silent total triumph. They were heading for at least one site at which they'd done a thorough use. I need coordinates, and I need to know exactly what I can expect to see when I show up, so I know I'm not walking into a CSF welcoming committee. You really do have a record, don't you? Said Perive. Isn't that why you're doing business with me? Very well. 6 speeder trucks with cold fresh livery and 4 passengers air speeders. 2 Coros, 2 custom G-Trevs. For 100 kilos of thermal. I can carry that with my nephew in 2 shopping bags, Chakar. You're not our only supplier of equipment, Mando, and I have personnel to move. I know you'll spit on this, but we're soldiers, and we have a code of honor. We want the goods for the price we agreed. No trap. Scarletta paused for effect. So I'll meet you there. No, it'll be my deputy, the woman you saw at our meeting earlier. I'm moving via another route. Transmit the coordinates now, and we'll start packing our bags. Your credits will be in the account you specified at 2050. Pleasure doing business. But the minute I see CSF issue blasters, or even a hint of blue uniform, we are bagging out. Scarlett closed the link, and for a moment, there was absolute silence in a room full of 15 hot, anxious, adrenaline-laden bodies. Then there was a loud collective whoop of satisfaction. Even Etane joined in, and Scarlett hadn't reckoned her for wild displays of enthusiasm. So all was not lost after all, Val said. Lord Murdalen was frantic, bouncing on his front legs while the other four scrabbled for purchase on the tattered carpet. Adrenaline excited Strills and made them eager to hunt. Plan B. Disable the vessels and slot the occupants. Disable, Squat said. Minimum force required to do the job. We're in a city, remember. Hollershot, Ordo said. I've still got Obrim on this link. Quick sit-rep, people. They clustered around Core, who was collating the moving red lines and points of light with quite enthusiasm. Methodically. Calm lad. He'd need to be that in bomb disposal. They've been going all shades of crazy here and here. He zoomed into the hollow image and indicated two tangled masses of red lines, like loose balls of thread. Both in the retail sector of Quadrant B85, where Phi had carried out the surveillance of Vinagis. It suggested that tagged suspects had done an awful lot of repeat movements. I say they're shifting kit by hand, plenty of it, in 2 locations. But the 2 apartments Captain Otto East have been totally dead for hours. They've left. Scarletta knew what he'd do in their position. He'd assembled what kit he had, move it discreetly to a central point, and then ship out. He wouldn't send a big, conspicuous repulsor truck to pick up from a dozen locations. It's all going out via the crates on that landing strip, he said. Agreed, Order and Mira nodded. Scorch just grinned. A red point of light suddenly moved from the location of the house in the begging sector where Scarletta had met Pariv. They watched it moving fast. Someone had left the house in a speeder. Holocam, Scarlett said. Odo played out the remote image from his glove emitter. A speeder had taken off from the roof. I'd bet that was Pariv leaving, said Val. Scarletta knew they'd lose some of the key players, but this was about making as big a dent in the Sept terror ranks as possible. Pity. Maybe we can catch up with him later. Vi held out his palm with a remote detonator on it. If he's flying that green speeder, the one they took me in, yes, Vi. You can blow it any time you like, Saj. the commandos had slipped back into calling him Sarge. It seemed to happen when they put their on again. I stuck a nice big surprise in his intake last night. I was in that speeder. I know. Clever, wasn't it? Scarata took the det and checked that it was disabled before slipping it in his pocket. Odeka, let me talk to jailer. He held his hand out for the comlink to Obrim. Can your people cover the locations we gave you? Obrim's voice was tight with tension. We are pulling people back off shifts now. We are synchronizing this for 2200, are we? Correct. I'll patch you into my comlink for the duration, but don't talk to me unless it's critical. Other than that, stay away from the area coordinates. We are going to transmit to you and pretend we never existed. Sorry about the rest. Not my team. A routine firearms control stop, I'm afraid. At least it made them bolt. They're vulnerable when they bolt. I'll talk to you in 12 hours if all goes smoothly then. Next breakfast on you, remember. You take care too, friend. The tangle of possibilities and risks in Scarata's mind had become crystal clear. Two key parts of the operation were now as pinned down as they could be. The synchronized raid on the lower priority terrorist targets by CSF and the interception of an unspecified number of key players at the landing strip, along with their vessels. Remember, Vode, no prisoners. Scarata took out his medpack and prepared a one-use painkiller syringe. Then he rolled down the soft leather of his left boot and stabbed the needle deep into his ankle. The pain made his muscles shake, but he clenched his teeth and let it pass. This was not the night to be slowed down by a limp. Shoot to kill. 14 men and 1 woman to kill maybe 20 terrorists. That expensive use of manpower compared to droid kill rates, but worth it. There were a few more targets still wandering around out there, ones they hadn't even tagged. But when it came to destroying a small organization, like a group of terror cells, taking out a cell like this one would have enormous impact. It slowed them down. It set them back while they recruited and reorganized and retrained. Even a few months made all the difference in this war. Rylan, he said, take one of my Verpine rifles tonight. Might come in handy. I'm grateful, Cal. Okay, Vode. This is now Captain Ordo's command as ranking officer. Even if we have no ranks right now. Scarata swung his arms through the full range of movement to check the fit of his armor. The sand gold suit that his adoptive father Munin had given him. He put his knife, the knife he had retrieved from his real father's dead body, up his right sleeve, handle uppermost. He could barely remember his parents or even his original name, but Munin Scarata was as vivid as his life and still with him every day. One of the precious departed whose names he recited each night. He hit his gauntlets against his chest plate to snap himself out of memories, Both squads jumped. Lord Magdalen, jowls flapping, threw its head back and let out a long, low, moaning howl. The preparations had worked the Strill into a hunting frenzy. It could see its master in full Mandalorian armor, and it smelled and heard men who were tense and ready to fight. All its instincts and training said, "Hunt, hunt, hunt." And Val held his gloved hands out to Atin. Astonishingly, Atin took it. There was nothing but the battle in mind now. They were all saving it for the enemy. Scoraza felt the visceral thrill tighten his throat and stomach. It had been many years since he'd put on this armor to fight. "Busis," he said, "helmets on." It was, he knew, a sight few would believe. Roland Vow and a Jedi Knight, both in full Mandalorian armor, and Republic commandos, ARC troopers, and a clone trooper in fighting order, so closely modeled on that armor he wore himself that they looked like one united army. He pulled on his own helmet before anyone noticed the tears in his eyes. "I ought to get a hollow of this," Cross said. Etain stood among them, incongruously fragile. "I could have lent you my Hokan armor, General," Fai said. "Only one careless owner." Etain lifted her tunic to reveal plates of body armor. "I'm not stupid." Then she pulled out 2 lightsabers. Scoraza winced. Mine and Master Fulier's. He'd have relished a fight like this. She was not herself tonight. If her usual self was that worried, awkward but tenacious soul, who found it so hard to be a Jedi, she was utterly alive. Darman seemed to be able to strike sparks off her. Scoraza hoped she did the same for him. Val flung out his arm to signal the Strill to race ahead. Oya, let's go hunting. Oya, mid." The Strill bayed at the top of its voice and shot out the doors to the landing platform. Odo turned to the strike team. Oya Vod. It was electric. It had never happened before, and it would probably never happen again. And they went hunting. 21. Baisi gal Braisi Tal. Vabo ad uis alit. Mihidra brati aimig parichi si. Kose los shibs uri narit. A pint of ale, a pint of blood. Buys men without a name. We never care who wins the war, so you can keep your fame. Popular drinking chant of Mandalorian mercenaries. Approximate translations edited for strong language. Landing area curry flesh from produce distribution division, quadrant F76. 2035 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. The produce distribution depot was as familiar as Aka Barracks now. Everything was as the holochat and holocam images had modeled it, although some of the vessels had been moved in the last hour. Oro took a small risk and flew the airspeed over the Curry Fresh landing strip at a cautious height just a few just fuel for reassurance. The depot was a lake of harsh white light dotted with loader droids, trucks, and an assortment of speeders. There were more vessels parked there than Periv had said. They were probably legitimate transports, shipping nothing more deadly than fruit. I think Cuttlefish might be annoyed about the damage to their fleet in the morning, Oda said. That's their problem, for not being too choosy about the company they keep. Zev secured one of the Verpine's rifles to his ribbing. He seemed to take Scarata's warning about bending anyone who bent his kit quite literally. They must be bankrolled by crime gangs themselves. We'll be doing CSF a favor then. It was always a challenge to insert teams into busy locations. Air traffic data said the strip clocked an average of 120 trucks and cargo lifters passing through the strip every 24 hours. 2,000 to 2,300 hours seemed to be the period when it almost shuts down completely. That was probably why the Separatists had picked the 2200 time slot for Skratas to deliver the explosives. They'd be loaded and gone by the time the overnight deliveries started again at 2300. If the teams had gone in early, they would have needed to avoid an awful lot of people and droids. You ever carried out an assault on an urban objective before? Sev said. Yes, Nidian. Heard of it? Sev paused to check his HUD database. Odo could see the icon flash up on his own HUD over the shared link. He heard Sev swallow. I meant one where you had to leave the place pretty well intact, sir. In that case, Sev, no. It'll be a first. Me too. Glad we could share this moment, then. Odo parked this airspeeder next to the small substation that routed utilities to the industrial area where the Kurufresh depot was located. A meter-wide conduit carrying pipes and cables stretched out 20 meters from the substations to span a gap that was 500 meters deep. That was their route in. All tooled up, Odo shouldered 2 Plex missiles launchers against his pauldron, one on each side. Yes, sir. Shoulder okay? Vi has a big mouth. Vi knows that I need to know if any of my team is compromised by injury. I'm fine, sir. Odo nudged him. Oya Nevad. Odo led the way across the conduit, checking Sev's progress in the HUD. A man who'd nearly fallen to his death could get a little nervous at heights like this. But Sev advanced as if he were on solid ground, and they slipped into the cover of crates and containers at the rear wall of the warehouse. Omega, are you in position? Nina's voice crackled slightly in Odo's comlink. We are 150 meters from the perimeter, sir, southeast of the strip, at the waste processing depot. Any activity in the vessels parked on the eastern edge of the strip? All quiet except for maintenance droids. DAW sent up a surveillance remote, and all the Rets are clustered at the warehouse entrance moving boxes. They've backed up 2 of the trucks against the loading bay. We are going to position ourselves on the roof then. The warehouse was a single-story building with an unforgiving flat roof. That meant anyone in the two repulsors trucks on the far side of the landing area would notice troops moving around. It was the only high vantage point overlooking the floodlit landing area to direct fire as well as pick off a few targets for themselves. Oda had decided it was asking for trouble to take up a position in the residential towers nearly 1,000 meters away. If they wound up on the receiving end of returned fire, there would be a lot of dead civilians to explain. Up you go, said Oda. Sev fired his rappelling line over the roof and tugged on it to ensure it was secure. The small wrench in his belt took most of his weight, but he pushed off with his boots, looking almost as if he were walking up the vertical surface. Oda waited as Sev rolled flat over the edge of the roof, Verpine rifle in his right hand. Roof clear, sir. Oda fired his own line and let the wrench lift him until he could reach the roof with his hand. He handed Sev the Plex launchers and hauled himself over the top to crawl flat on elbows and knees until he was near the front edge of the roof. They both flipped down the scopes in their visors at the same time. Oda saw the same image repeated in Sev's viewpoint icon on the margin of his HUD. In an ideal world, we could have left a time charge on that utility conduit and paralyzed this whole sector before we went in, Sev said. And that just advertises that the fact that the Grand Army was here. We don't exist, remember. We've gone bandit. Just fantasizing. The textbook approach was to knock out the two illumigrids and then move in. But timing was critical. Scarata and Jusek needed to make the delivery of explosives and then get clear before the party started. Omega, we're in position. Copy that. This time it was Marie's voice. On my mark. We'll knock out both lights and then provide covering fire while you advance from the south side. Delta, what's your location? Boss here, sir. We'll be in position behind the warehouse in 2 minutes. Attendant Fixer will enter from the front. Scorch and I will cover the north side of the strip. Attendant seemed to have slipped easily into the temporary gap left by Sev. There wasn't the slightest hint in their voices that their former brother wasn't welcome. Oda supposed that once you were one of Vao's trainees, you could merge back into the batch without comment when there was a job to be done. Okay, Vode. Now we watch and wait. Morel, Phi, Nina, Daman, and Cora crouched in the cover of a conveyor belt of bins outside the race depot, where droids collected the contents for compaction and disposal. Phi sniffed dubiously. There was the distinct sulphurous tang of rotten vegetables. Harmless, or his helmet's filter would never have let the aroma through, but nauseating nonetheless. On Nina's signal, they sprinted from the bins and dropped down by a pillar at the end of the walkway that led across the Colonel Fresh depot. You are very shiny, you two, Nina said, jerking his thumb at Cor and Morel, who were almost glowing in the light from the red flashing sign of a seedy calf bar. Why don't you just shoot me here on that Decutler right armor? You rely on that black stuff way too much, Murder said. It's all about a stealthy approach, you see. He heaved a massive Mason reciprocating quad blaster onto his hip and powered up the micro repulsor lift to take some of its weight. 4 huge double-barreled Blasson muzzles loomed from the weapon's body. It was close on 80 centimeters long and looked more like a cruiser's close-in defense cannon. Stealth and a nice big sip quad, of course. Vi patted Cor's conspicuously white shoulder. His men will follow him anywhere, Nevard, but only out of curiosity. Okay, get curious then. Morel indicated the direction of the landing strip. They've moved some of the vessels, so we're going to have to cover a little extra open ground. At least most of the cockpits are facing the same way, so we might have a blind spot to take advantage of. Diamond Verpine rifle slung across his back was still examining the other impressive items of Merson firepower. Excess that was balanced across his thighs. The Z6 rotary blaster. It was almost as big as the SIP quad. He looked wary of it and passed it to Cor. We really did say no prisoners, didn't we, sir? Not exactly a sniper weapon, I know. Etain would like that, Vi said. Bit classier than her tranny LJ's 50. Maras nodded. The general can get her own rotary. That's my baby. Beats a bunch of flowers, Star. Has she called in yet, by the way? Oda's voice cut in. There was no privacy on this frequency. She and Val followed Parive's trace to an apartment in Zone 3, Quadrant A4. They're watching him now. Isn't that a diplomatic quarter? Asked Morel, whose capacity for memorizing data seemed as unlimited as his brother's. Afraid so, said Odo. That could get interesting if we go in there. We're into a whole new level of deniability. If I watched Darman's head drop for a moment, but there wasn't so much as a breath or a click of teeth. He snapped back to his alert position. I wasn't sure if he was afraid for Etain's safety or of what she might do. And he didn't plan to ask Val. Val doesn't need that strill when he's got a Jedi with him. He takes mud everywhere, Mira said, like Mendo fathers take their sons into battle. If I didn't know old Psycho was a head case, I'd say that was cute. What is it going to do? You've never seen a strill hunt, have you? Morel didn't say another word. He signaled advance to Nina with a sweep of his hand, and the squad sprinted for the perimeter of the landing strip. Diplomatic Sector, Quadrant A4, 2145 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. Etain stood on the ledge of a soaring office tower facing the elegant apartment block and realized exactly what Black Ops truly meant. Val stood beside her. The ledge was about 150 centimeters wide, and the breeze at this height was noticeable, even on climate-controlled Coruscant. "What's the matter?" Val said, his parade ground voice slightly softened by his Mando helmet. Didn't know how dirty politics could be. That diplomats aren't all nice, honest people. That they keep unpleasant company. "I think I worked that out already." She felt the Strill brush past her leg, padding impatiently up and down the narrow ledge. It had no fear of heights, it seemed, but the consequences of pursuing Pareve into that building reached far beyond assassinating a terrorist. "We'll have to get him to come out then. He could lie low there for weeks. If he's hiding, yes." "I find you hard to follow sometimes, Val." "He may be collecting something, or somebody. He was in a mad rush to leave. I sense he's alone. He isn't picking up a colleague." Val leveled the scope of the Verpine, angled down about 30 degrees. The Strill teetered on the edge of the ledge. "I can see Pareve. Yes, he's alone. He's in front of the doors to the balcony. Now that's arrogant, my friend. Think nobody can see you, eh? Etain, want to take a look?" Val handed her the Verpine. She took it nervously, hearing Scarletta's constant admonition to take care of the weapon, and was surprised how light and harmless it felt. She peered down the scope and felt Val reached out and flicked something on the optic. A different image appeared in the eyepiece, slightly pink-tinted, of a man rummaging through a desk and sticking data chips into his pad, activating them, and then extracting and discarding them. A pale blob of a light shimmered from his chest, and then from his back as he turned. "What can you see?" "He's loading data," Etain said. "He's shredding someone's files. Told you so." "What's the white light? The EM emissions from the dust?" "Correct." Etain handed back the rifle. "That datapad is going to contain some interesting material. How do we get hold of it?" "The old-fashioned way." Val sounded as if he'd smiled. It was hard to tell under the helmet. "Let's get him to come to the balcony." "I'm not sure I can influence his mind at this range, or at all." "No need, my dear." Val folded a cloth one-handed and placed it under the stock of the Verpine. At the point where it touched his armor shoulder. "I hate a standing shot without something to lean against. But I'm not as sure-footed as Murd, so I'm not going to attempt to kneel." He leaned back slightly against the wall at his back. "But this Verpine is beautiful." He rested his firing hand on his raised forearm. "It's almost a handgun." "Just tell me what you're going to do." "Make a noise on his balcony, so he steps out." "What if he doesn't?" "Then we'll have to go in and get him the hard way." "But if you—" "Let's get him outside if we can." Val paused to let an ear speeder pass. The narrow skyline was almost deserted. Most armies I ended up serving had no notion of advanced planning. I got to be very good at unorthodox solutions. Etain couldn't help but feel the patterns in the force right then. Being pregnant seemed to have enhanced her sensitivity to the living force by an order of magnitude. Val felt like a pool of utter cold calm, almost a Jedi Master's footprint in the Force. The Strill felt alien. It had an unfathomable, glittering intelligence, and a wild, joyful heart swirling within it. Had it not been for Val's rifle and the Strill's savage teeth, the pair might have felt like a peaceful man and his happy child. She felt something else, as she did constantly now, the vivid, complex pattern of her unborn child. It's a boy. I'm standing on a ledge with thousands of meters of nothing below me, and I am not afraid. She stopped herself from reaching out to the man in the Force. It might distract him at a critical moment. She simply felt that he was safe and confident, and that was enough. Could you choke him using the Force? Val said quietly. What? Just asking, Val. Very handy. I was never trained to do that. Pity. All those fine combat skills wasted. Val exhaled audibly and paused. There was the slightest of movement in her peripheral vision as he squeezed the trigger, and a small snack echoed as a puff of vaporized stoned billowed briefly off the corner of the apartment wall. Ah, Val said. The rifle scope was still pressed to the eye slit in his black helmet. He looked like the very image of death. Much as Etain had grown to find that armor reassuring, it made it no less intimidating. Now, this is not a man used to avoiding professional assassins. Watch carefully and tell me what you feel. Parif paused at the transparent steel doors leading onto the balcony and shoved the datapad inside his tunic. Then he took out his blaster. He opened the doors by a meter, no more, and stood looking around Blasseries, 1 foot still inside the apartment, one on the balcony itself. Etain heard Val exhale, and then Pariv's head jerked backwards, with a brief plume of dark blood, as if he had been punched by an invisible fist. He fell, arms thrown wide, dead, gone. Whatever had been Pariv was now gone from the Force. No pain, no surprise, and suddenly not there. Murd, the Strill, was staring up at its master, unblinking, tail thrashing the ledge in enthusiasm. It began making little whimpering noises deep in its throat. I must treat myself to one of these, Val said, still all complete calm and satisfaction, gazing at the Verpine rifle. Outstanding class people, those little insectoids. He's dead. I should think so. The hydrostatic shock generated by a Verpine projectile is substantial. A clean headshot is instantaneous. Cure him. But the datapad is still in his tunic. Good. He turned to the Strill and put his finger to his lips. Ildesi murd. Silence. Cool. The Strill stared up into his face, gold eyes fixed on his head, drawn back a little into its cowl-like folds of loose skin. Its rippling stopped abruptly. Val crouched down and held out his arm as if pointing and closed his fingers into a fist. Oh yeah, he whispered. Find the Arulti. Find the traitor. Mud spun around and stabbed its claws into the stonework. Etain watched, stunned, as it climbed the wall and made its way to the next ledge above. The Strill appeared to understand what was said to it, even hand signals, but she had no idea what it was doing. Oya mud. The Strill balanced on its full rear legs, and then sprang into the abyss. Oh my. And then Etain suddenly realized why the Strill looked so bizarre. It spread all 6 legs, and the loose, ugly skin that made it appear such a shambling mess was stretched taut by the air pressure beneath it. It glided effortlessly down in a perfect stoop onto the balcony opposite. Val took off his helmet and wiped his brows. His face was a study in complete admiration and, yes, love. Clever Murd, he murmured. Clever baby. It's a glider. Extraordinary animals, Strills. It's going to fetch the datapad? Val paused. Etain could see a smile forming on his lips. Yes. Is it male or female? Both, Val said. Murd has been with me since I joined the Mandalorians. Strills live far longer than humans, who will care for it when I'm dead. I'm sure someone who will value it greatly. I want it to be cared for, not valued. Val replaced his helmet. They waited. Etain strained to see when the animal emerged from the apartment with. She imagined the datapad clamped in its teeth, or maybe it had more surprise in store, like a pouch as Jinat the Golanin had. She stared aghast. Murd had dragged Pariv's body out onto the balcony and was roaring at it. She believed the animal was trying to tear out the datapad right up to the moment that it got a good grip with its massive jaws on the corpse's shoulder and hauled it up onto the safety rail. What's it doing? Val laughed. Murd balanced the body on the rail like a sack of stones, wobbled a little, and then launched itself into the air. Etain was stunned by its ability to move a man's weighing at least 80 kilos, but not half as stunned as when she saw its free fall turn into a vertical climb as it struck out and its parachute of skin became wings, membranes. Murd soared like a raptor carrying its prey. Murd flew. Fearfeck, Etain said. There was no other word for it. Language, Val said, clearly amused. Murd thudded onto the ledge and hauled Pariv up behind it. Val crouched as best as he could on the narrow strip of stone and felt inside the tunic for the datapad. Got it. Let's go. Good Murd. Clever Murd. Murdala Murdika. He opened his comlink. Cal, Pariv's no longer a problem, and we have a useful datapad. See you shortly. Murd was ecstatic, whimpering and slobbering in delight, as Val rubbed its head. As retrievers went, it could have no equal. What about the body? Etain said, still stunned. Are we just leaving it here, on an office window ledge? It'll give CSF if forensics seems a fascinating project to keep them occupied, Val said. And we didn't even have to enter a diplomatic compound, did we? Etain, now used to death and assassination, couldn't help herself. She reached over and rubbed the Strill's head, too, although it stank and could probably kill her in a single vast bite. It was still miraculous. Clever Murd, she said. Clever. Somewhere near Fresh Farm Produce Distribution Division, Quadrant F-76, 2150 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. That almost suits you, Boudica. Scarata sat astride the speeder's pylon seat, datapad and chrono at the ready. The operation was underway. Puriv was dead. Now it was time for Scarata to check that the credit transfer had been made. He watched the screen that showed the status of the temporary bank account that would vanish without trace or audit trail in just over a day. I suspect the Jedi Council wouldn't agree. Jusik adjusted the bags on the bike's cargo straps. Not even if General Kenobi himself wears armor. You don't worry much about that, said Scarata. I haven't thought that far ahead. A Mando mercenary has to plan for the future these days, son. Even there turns out to be no future at all. And so should you. Jusik laughed. I thought you Mando aides lived only for the day. You even have trouble using anything but the present tense. Scarata's eyes never left the datapad screen. Then it reloaded, and suddenly an anonymous number account in a bank on Aragu was 4 million credits in the black. Scarata hit verify, and the credits were there. Yes, this was real. He had the credits. He felt one tension evaporate from his chest, and another familiar, comfortable, and old friend take its place. He was ready to fight. He opened the comlink to the whole strike team. Stand by, Vode. Stand by. The credits have cleared. We are moving in to make the drop now. Order here. Copy that. Delta here. Copy that. Morel here. Copy that. Do we get 10%? Phi muttered. Jusik powered up the speeder bike. You'd be amazed what you may get out of this, Phi. The speeder shot up into the air and spun 90 degrees before Jusik aimed it at the Korufesh depot. Preferably not a broken neck, though. Sorry, Cal, said Jusik. Scarata checked his chrono, 21:55. A good rousing chant of Daruda might have psyched him up better, but this was a different battlefield. Boudica, those explosives packs are well wrapped, aren't they? Thoroughly. They're really affecting the handling of this speeder, too. We've got a few minutes. Take it easy. Udesi. Jusik grinned. If things get a little hairy out there, I can use my force powers, can't I? No witnesses. Go ahead. Jusik took the speeder high over the landing strip, and Scarata noted Odo and Sev flat on the roof of the warehouse as they spiraled down to land. The two soldiers didn't move. Omega and Delta were nowhere to be seen. That reassured him enormously. It had been a joy to train commandos who became better soldiers than he could ever be. Tonight would test them, though. There were enough explosives in the area now to take out a quadrant and well beyond. Fine on a battlefield, but not in a city. Careful. Go careful. The speeder settled and hung at rest just above the ground. A group of 5 men and the middle-aged woman he'd seen at the meeting earlier were the welcoming committee, and they all had blasters. Visibles on belts were held loosely at their sides. They directed Jusek to a spot between 2 trucks, sheltered from anyone who might pass by. Skorata and Jusek got off the speeder bike and stood with their arms at their sides, calm and businesslike. Skorata removed his helmet. Jusek kept his busi on. The credits cleared fine, Skorata said. The woman inspected the speeder, which was laden like a Tatooine bantha with enormous anonymous bags of rough sacking. This is all the 500 grade. 400 quarter-kilo packs, bag in tens. I suggest you split the load for safety. The woman shrugged. We know how to handle explosives. She reached out to unfasten one bag and squatted down to slide the 10 bundle packets onto the ground. She squinted at the thick packaging and took out a knife from her pocket. Skorata didn't need to see Jusek's face to know that the blood had drained from it. Don't stick anything metallic into it. The electrolytic reaction will set it off. Morel's little chemical enhancements to thwart the bomb makers in the event of their getting away with any of the explosives was about to kill them all. Whoa, Skorata sighed irritably, and hoped to the force that he didn't sound that terrified. Man, he was right then. Don't shove a knife in that woman. Unwrap it properly. Here, let me do it. Are you sure you know what you're doing? There was a collective involuntary gasp in his comlink earpiece, a very restrained one. He heard Odo mutter, "Oh, sick. You insolent little Mandalorian thug," she sneered. But she stood back to let him take over, and she held her blaster to his head. Skorata ripped the bundle open with nervous hands and broke out one packet, tearing the flexi wrap with his teeth to expose the soft, light brown contents. It tasted oddly sweet. Here, believe me. The woman scowled at him and squeezed the explosive between her fingers. I'm checking that this isn't just dyed detonite. Tell you what, Skorata said, wondering if Jusek might try a spot of mind influence right then. Pick as many packs as you like at random, and I'll unwrap them, and then you can prove to yourself that they're not booby-trapped either. He heard Oda's voice in his ear. Calbia, you're scaring us. Okay. The woman pointed to another bag on the speeder bike. That one. Empty it in front of me. Skorata obeyed. He unwrapped the bundle and waited for her to choose a pack at random. He tore it open and let her inspect it. She repeated the process 3 times. Skorata stood up, hands on hips, and sighed theatrically. I've got all night, sweetheart. Have you? The woman looked into his face as if she liked the idea of killing him anyway. Bag it up and get out of here. He glanced at his chrono, 22:20. Obrim would be getting jumpy now, with squads of CSF officers waiting throughout Galactic City to read the long list of suspect addresses he'd given them. You heard the lady. He shoved Jusek in the back. Get on with it. The last few seconds before a hasty exit were always the most terrifying. A hairbreadth lay between victory and defeat, life and death. Jusek secured the last of the bags and dumped the rest from the speeder in a pile between the trucks. Now get lost, she said. I take it I can't count you as a repeat customer then. She raised the blaster elegantly. Scarata replaced his helmet and swung onto the speeder bike behind Jusek. They lifted into the air and climbed above the warehouse. Fairfax, said Darman's voice in his ear. I hate it when you improvise, Sarge. Like you don't. Standing by. Order cut in. The woman's loading all the explosives except a single bag into one truck. The one with a green livery nearest the loading bay. I repeat, negative. The green truck. Do not target the green truck, or it's goodbye to half of Coruscant. Females never listen to a thing I say, thankfully, Scarata said. He knew she'd react like that. So that means there's only one vessel we can't blow up. Priority is to isolate the green truck and ground it before engaging other targets. Copy that, sir, a chorus said. Jusek set the speeder down 300 meters behind the warehouse in a cluster of shuttered wholesalers' units. Scarata sat breathing deeply for a moment to steady himself, before opening his comlink again with a double click of his back teeth. Obrim, this is Scarata. Got you, Cal. You can roll now, my friend. Talk to you later. Copy that. Obrim's channel snapped into silence. Omega, Delta, all units, this is Cal. We're clear. All yours, Captain. Copy that, Sergeant. Odo began counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2. Go, go, go. Oh yeah. A bitter little war with far-reaching consequences was unleashed in downtown Galactic City.